Hey, what's going on? I've been waiting and there's still no deposit. Deposit? What are you talking about? Despite his visible anger, I remained as calm as ever. Don't play dumb. I'm talking about the 5 million. You said your sister would get all the inheritance, right? I deftly sidestepped my ex-husband as he confronted me. At the entrance to the living room, my sister stood, her face clearly showing regret. Sister, do you have it? The will? Surprised at being suddenly addressed, my sister was startled and then began rummaging through her bag. And what she pulled out was indeed the will, unmistakably in our father's handwriting. Seeing this, I retrieved the will that I had received from my father from the back of the shelf and handed it over. What? This is completely different. I'm Emily, a 25-year-old office worker. My husband Tom is 2 years my senior and was my childhood friend. We married 2 years ago and now live in a rented apartment about 2 hours drive from my parents' house. My sister Catherine, the same age as Tom, lives at home without working. Our mother passed away from illness when we were young, and our father raised us as a single father. Raised by a father who was a trading company president, we belonged to the wealthy class. Although we missed our mother, we grew up without financial struggles and are very grateful to our father. However, my sister has been extravagantly spending the family's wealth, living in luxury every day. Our father never kicked her out or urged her to work. I know that if I said I wanted to quit my job and return home, my father would welcome me with open arms. Yet, I've always wanted to live a solid life on my own, without relying on my family or father. As an independent adult, I worked hard, lived on my income, and married my childhood friend. It was the happy life I had always dreamed of. Everything changed recently, however, when my father passed away. He suffered a heart attack in his sleep and never returned. Informed by my sister, I rushed to our family home, unable to accept the reality of our father's death, and attended the wake and funeral. I barely remember my mother's death when I was 2, so losing my father so suddenly was incredibly painful. Father, I still hadn't done enough for you. Tears flowed as I was overwhelmed with regret. Living nearby, I regretted not visiting home more often due to work. If only I had spent more time with him, seen his face more, gone out together. The regrets were endless. Contrary to my grief, my sister was surprisingly calm, almost cold. Hey, how much do you think father's estate is worth? What? He just passed away and you're talking about money? In front of our father's urn, my sister began discussing the inheritance. Perhaps she had been waiting for his death all along. Indeed, with about 3 million, we could live comfortably for life. Make sure you share it properly with me, Emily. Tom, who had accompanied me home, joined in. Both seemed inhumane to me. Rather than mourning our father, they were obsessed with the inheritance. I never imagined Tom could be so cold-hearted. Hey, there must be a will hidden somewhere, right? Shall we look for it together? Ah, good idea. Let's search. The voices of my sister and Tom, full of excitement, could be heard in the distance. I walked out of my family home, feeling dazed. I had the will that my father entrusted to me before he passed. It stated that my sister would inherit all the real estate, and I would inherit $5 million. Surely my father understood my sister's extravagant spending habits when he wrote this will. He knew that even an enormous amount like $5 million would vanish in an instant if it were given to her. So he probably decided to bequeath real estate to my sister, ensuring a steady income out of concern for her future. It must have been both a sign of his worry as a father and his trust in me. So, how much did you end up getting? Tom, having returned home, asked me this abruptly. Didn't you find it? The will? Catherine found it, but she wouldn't show it to me, saying it was addressed to her. She was adamant about not showing it to anyone else. You have one too, right? Hearing this, I became confused, unable to grasp my father's intentions. Why had he made 2 wills? Considering that my angry sister hadn't stormed over to my place, the will found at home must have contained something favorable for her. Knowing her, she would prefer the $5 million over the real estate. Perhaps the content of the will I was entrusted with differed from what was written in the other will. An idea then occurred to me. I only get $1,000. The rest should all go to my sister. Tom's eyes gleamed sharply. Really? Catherine gets all the inheritance? Yes, probably around $5 million, I guess. Ah, right. I remembered I have something to do. Tom hurriedly left the living room. His movement was so brisk that I couldn't even hold him back, just watching his departing figure. Since then, Tom's attitude toward me noticeably cooled. He started coming home in the morning without contacting me, and when asked where he had been, he dismissed it as just a drive. He began carrying his smartphone everywhere, which made me suspect infidelity. However, without any concrete evidence, time just continued to pass. One day, about a month after my father's death, I returned home from overtime to find lights on in my house. It was unusual for Tom to be home so early. Upon entering, I noticed a pair of women's shoes that seemed familiar. As I opened the living room door, I saw my sister, Catherine, leaning comfortably against Tom. Emily, welcome back. Catherine, still entwined with Tom's arm, spoke to me. What's this about? I asked, still in my coat. Well, I'm going to marry Catherine. Tom stated it casually as if it was nothing. Marry Catherine? You're not single, you know? What are you talking about? That's right, so I'm divorcing you. I'm going to remarry Catherine. It felt like a hammer blow to the head. My sister sat next to Tom, looking triumphant as she stared at me. I couldn't cry, maybe because I had cried so much when my father died. However, I realized why I was more upset than I thought. Could Tom really love my sister? We 3 childhood friends had always been together since we were young, but Tom chose me as his marriage partner. My sister seemed to have seen Tom romantically, but Tom always had eyes only for me. I knew why Tom suddenly wanted a divorce. Sister, are you okay with this? Tom is with you because he knew about the inheritance, right? I began, but I stopped mid-sentence. My sister's sharp gaze was like a warning to say no more. Hold on. Don't get it wrong. Tom loves me more than you. Do you understand? He left you for me. Tom, seeking agreement smiled gently at my sister. I felt like I might faint. There was sadness, but more than that, a rising anger. What was so good about this man that I married him? My anger was directed more at Tom than my sister. Catherine was being deceived by Tom. He was likely ingratiating himself with her to claim our father's inheritance for himself. Then Tom pointed to the divorce papers on the table. Hurry up and submit it. It's just up to you. Saying this, Tom took Catherine's hand and left the house. I was left alone in the spacious living room. Picking up a pen that had fallen to the floor, I made my decision. After the divorce was finalized, Catherine and Tom moved abroad almost as if they were fleeing. Despite what happened, I had no intention of claiming my sister's inheritance or chasing after them in anger. After Catherine and Tom moved abroad, I called a family meeting to verify the wills. The relatives were shocked by the stark differences between the wills my sister and I each had. It seems the contents written in my will and Catherine's were completely opposite. After our father's death, Catherine must have been overjoyed to find the will at the family home. She would inherit. She must have been trembling with joy. When we compared the copy of the will Catherine left behind and the one I was entrusted with, one of the relatives exclaimed, "Ah!" It was a flaw only noticeable when comparing the two wills. My father must have understood Catherine's personality more deeply than I ever could. That was the only conclusion I could come to. About a year later, Catherine and Tom suddenly returned to the country and showed up at my house. As I was dining in the living room, they entered with heavy footsteps, and Tom shouted in a loud voice, "Hey, what's going on? I've been waiting and there's still no deposit." "Deposit? What are you talking about?" Tom was visibly angry, but in contrast, I remained as calm as ever. "Don't play dumb. I'm talking about the $5 million. You said your sister would get all the inheritance, right?" I deftly sidestepped my ex-husband as he confronted me. At the entrance to the living room, my sister stood, her face clearly showing regret. "Sister, do you have it? The will?" Surprised at being suddenly addressed, Catherine startled and began rummaging through her bag. And what she pulled out was, indeed, the will, unmistakably in our father's handwriting. Seeing this, I retrieved the will that I had received from my father from the back of the shelf and handed it over. What? What is this? The contents are completely different." Catherine, comparing the two wills, let out a voice like a scream. Tom snatched the will from my hand, read it, and immediately began to tremble. "Catherine is supposed to inherit the $5 million. The one you had must be fake." "Absolutely, you didn't write it yourself, did you?" I silently watched the two of them making a scene. "Wait, look closely. Isn't that clearly our father's handwriting? The fake will is the one sister has." My cold words brought the commotion of the two to an abrupt halt. "Didn't you know that a will without a date is invalid?" I showed Tom and Catherine the will I held. At the bottom, there was our father's signature, seal, and the date of creation. However, the will Catherine had lacked a creation date. Dad predicted that you'd be blinded by the sum of $5 million and wouldn't even check the date. He also figured that if you believed your will was authentic, you wouldn't abscond with the inheritance until its distribution began. Dad had it all planned out. Catherine collapsed to the floor, her knees giving out. So what I'm getting is the real estate, not the 5 million. All the real estate owned by our father goes to you. I've already confirmed it with the relatives and proceeded as per this will. Catherine's face turned to tears, clearly shocked at not inheriting the 5 million. Tom, unable to grasp reality, stood dazed, but then suddenly smiled and spoke to Catherine. Real estate is even better than 5 million. If you spend 5 million, it's all gone. But with real estate, you can earn continuously by renting it out. We did it. We can live comfortably forever. Encouraged by Tom, Catherine seemed to regain some composure. Her complexion improved significantly. That's right, real estate is like a money tree. My condolences. My voice halted their celebration and they both abruptly fell silent and looked at me. More like a negative inheritance than a money tree. Catherine's face twisted in confusion. What do you mean? Haven't you been watching the news? Oh, right, you were abroad. You might not know. I took a deep breath and told them. The real estate you inherited is now worthless. Most of those properties are in areas where redevelopment has stopped. No one lives there anymore. It's like a ghost town. Despite their refusal to face the reality, I continued. Sister, did you pay the inheritance tax? Inheritance tax? There might be penalties too. Even if you sell all the real estate, it might not be enough. Catherine and Tom's faces grew pale. You're kidding. And we've already got debts in Hawaii. Unable to bear it any longer, Catherine began to cry. According to Tom, after learning that the $5 million would be theirs, Catherine and he extravagantly spent and repeatedly borrowed money abroad. However, even after a year, the money was not transferred. Facing imminent repayment deadlines, the heavily indebted couple hastily returned to Japan to check the situation. After explaining this much, Tom, who had been glancing at me, spoke in a conciliatory tone. Emily, we can start over, right? I realized I really love you more than Catherine. I forcefully brushed off Tom's outstretched hand. Unbelievably, Tom was ready to abandon Catherine in an instant, realizing that I was the one inheriting the $5 million. There's no way we can start over. You're just after the money, aren't you? What are you talking about? I really love you, Emily. What did you just say? You told me you love me more than Emily. Catherine's eyes widened in shock as she confronted Tom. Who would love a jobless woman drowning in debt like you? You deceived me, that's terrible. Their argument intensified, becoming utterly uncontrollable. They were no longer paying attention to me, just hurling insults at each other. It seemed like a good time to tell them the truth. Thinking this, I spoke up. Sorry to interrupt your discussion, but have you finally decided to remarry me? That's impossible. It's not about that. I just wanted to let you know that I no longer have the $5 million, so don't count on my money. It's gone? Catherine, surprised, gaped open-mouthed. I bought a mansion. It's scheduled to start construction soon. The rest I donated entirely, so no matter how much you search this house, you won't find a penny left with me. Both of them stared at me, stunned. After inheriting the $5 million, I immediately paid the inheritance tax and considered how to use the money. I bought an entire apartment building scheduled to start construction this spring near the station. I thought having real estate income would keep me secure in the future. The remainder I donated to an organization for children who lost their parents. I had a comfortable life thanks to my father, who was a company president, even though my mother passed away when I was young. However, life isn't always so smooth. The guilt I felt for being raised in such a privileged environment seemed to ease a little. I can live on my own, with my own income. I am different from my sister who lived at home without working and just enjoyed herself, and from Tom who tried to have an easy life by cozying up to the wealthy. The two of them seemed crushed. Their heads hung low, but I had no intention of offering a helping hand. It was all their own doing. I couldn't simply offer help easily to the two of them, who were now looking at me with hopeful eyes. First, let's calculate the taxes, then we'll sort out the debts. It'll be okay, we can manage this. As I declared this with a smile, they looked at me with weary expressions. In the end, their combined debts and taxes amounted to $2 million. The real estate Catherine inherited was mostly worthless, generating very little income. Complicating matters further were the overseas loan sharks. They even came to Japan to collect the money, and the two were constantly moving around the country fearful of their whereabouts being discovered. Unable to endure such a situation, they frequently came to family and relatives begging for money. However, no one was willing to help them due to their self-inflicted troubles. Moreover, no one wanted to lend them money carelessly and become a target themselves. As for me, I was still busy working as an office worker. Thanks to the apartment building I purchased, I now have a bit more financial comfort. On my days off, I volunteer with children from single-parent homes, which makes my life fulfilling. Recently, I received an offer to take over my father's company. The successor suggested that I should be the one to take over. I put that offer on hold for now, citing my lack of experience, but I'm thinking of taking over my father's position after gaining more experience and growth.